Okay, so now we made it to another section, which we're going to learn how to create functions. In the last video, we kind of introduced to you what a side effect is. It's something that I'm planning to see because we use the word side effect, and I want to make sure you can learn it now because I believe that it's easier to plant seeds than it is to plant a tree. So we can plant them early and get you to get somewhat of an understanding earlier. We'll be able to build upon it. Now, if you're new to this particular video and you're not a part of the cohort, the book or the textbook is in the description. You can click on it. It's free. There's no charge for it. But you may want to go back and look at previous videos because we really walk you through how to learn how to code. So without further ado, let's get into the curriculum. Creating functions. While using the functions built into JavaScript is useful, the most powerful aspect of functions is the ability of programmers to create their own. There are several ways to define functions. In JavaScript, we will introduce one technique in this chapter and a second technique in the next chapter. Function syntax. To create a function, we use the following syntax. Function, the function name, and the parentheses are parameters. You can have as many parameters as you want or you need for your function. Here, the function is a keyword that instructs JavaScript to create a new function using the definition that follows. Since functions is a keyword, it may not be used elsewhere, for example, as the name of a variable. Following function is the function name, my function, as an example here, which is my function. In the generic example above, the function name is determined by you, the programmer, and should therefore follow best practices. In particular, functions names should use camel case and have descriptive names. We will have more to say about naming functions near the end of this chapter. Following the function's name, we define parameters. Now, this is again important to understand because a lot of confusion is based around how do you know when it's a parameter and how you know when it's an argument? Well, again, one clue is the function keyword. When you are creating the function, that's when you use parameters. When you're invoking the function, when it's just my function without the keyword function, that's when you are going to pass the arguments. That's the difference when you know you're using parameters versus arguments. Very subtle, but if you use that as a rule, it'll be easier for you to get your head around the concept. Now think of parameters as variables. We can use parameters as variables, as you saw in the last video. You don't have to declare them with let or const. Now, unless you want to make it something that you can't change, but you're not going to use a const for a parameter. That can be used only with the function itself. Yes, that means this is in scope. This is that word scope again. These parameters are only variables that can be used inside the function body. The number and names of the parameters are determined by the programmer based on what they want the function to do. A function may be defined with several parameters or no parameters at all. It can be empty. That's what we're saying. Many programming languages require you to state which data type each parameter should be. For example, strings or number. In such languages, if you try to call a function with a parameter of incorrect type, an error results. JavaScript does not allow you to specify the types of parameters. Though the JavaScript extension TypeScript does, we will learn a bit of TypeScript later on. Yeah, we're going to give you a high-level learning of TypeScript and how to declare your types. After the parameters and closing parentheses with curly braces or brackets is the function body. Anything out in between these curly braces or brackets is the function body. Remember that term. This is where the actions that the function should carry out are defined. The function body can consist of any amount of code, whatever it takes to get the function to work. Now understand, a function should do one thing. Don't try to create functions that do multiple things. It's done. It happens. Developers do it. But a good practice is to just allow your function to do one thing. Like I said in our house analogy, you have what we call the HVAC system. And in it, you have your central air unit, your furnace, and your hot water heater. Although they're all three a part of that system, they all have one job to do each. So let's see function syntax in action. We first consider a program that prints an array of names. We've learned this when we were doing the for loop. We declare and initialized a variable with an array of names in it. And then we looped over it to get the array of names. And then when we print them out, or this console.log, it prints out those names. Now we could do the exact same thing in a function. Following this pattern, we can create a function that prints any array of names. So here we are. We have that same for loop, but this time we put it inside of the function. And then we created a function name called print name, and we're passing it a parameter called names. Breaking down the components of a function using our new terminology gives us the function name, which is called print names, parameters or parameter, which is names, and the body. Inside the body is the for loop. Notice that there is nothing about this function that forces name to actually contain names. Remember, JavaScript is dynamic. This is just really a placeholder. You can give it whatever data you want to give it. This is why it's important to give it a very distinct name, because if I don't know what it is as a developer coming behind you, I may mess it up and then give a different result. But here we're saying the better name for it would be to give it a name like print array, because those names are actually in an array. Now, our function can be used the same way as each of the built-in functions, such as console.log, by calling it. Remember that calling a function triggers its actions to be carried out. So here's a little bit of information. It doesn't matter where you create the function. This is where the rule changes. We know that JavaScript is an interpreted language, and we know that it's dynamic and it goes line by line. But it doesn't matter where you create your function. You can create your functions, and you can have function 1, function 2, function 3. It doesn't matter until you invoke the function or call the function. So I can call function 2 before function 1 and 3. And then that's when the compiler will go line by line with inside the function. But until you call or invoke the function, it's not going to run. Now notice something here. We have a console log in between each one of the print array functions that we're calling to trigger it. And remember now how dynamic it is. All I'm doing is printing an array. Here is what we call the parameter, and here are the arguments. Notice that I have two different types of arguments, and when it prints out the arguments because that's what the function does. And notice in the console dialog, you can do this. It's so that you can have separation. So this is one way you can do it. This is high level. This is not how we're going to do it in programming when you create your program in React. But pay attention that all I need to do is call that print array. I didn't have to go up here like here and with this for loop create a variable with the names in it. This is what we call hard-coded. This is what we call dynamic. This function makes it dynamic because now I can print out I can call whatever I want to call as long as I'm passing in that parameter. And notice names, it's looking for one array. So that's what it prints out. So I am going to stop the video here because we're going to go into defining and calling because the video is getting long. But let me read this little part. This example illustrates how functions allow us to make our code abstract. Abstraction is the process of taking some specific and making it more general. In this example, a loop that prints the contents of a specific array variable. Something specific is transformed into a function that prints the contents of any array, something general. This right here is general. I can put whatever, as long as it's an array of strings, I can put whatever information or data I want there. Okay, so we made it to the end of this particular part of the section. Again, I want to take my time and go through these sections because there's a lot of information here that you need to know and understand. So that's the end of this particular video. We'll pick it up in the next to finish out this section. So remember, the more you do, the more you improve.